B2 English Story. Sleepless Nights. Lucia was having trouble sleeping. She couldn't remember the last time she had a good night's sleep. She was getting to the point where she dreaded going to bed because she knew she would just toss and turn all night and become increasingly frustrated with herself. Then, as the early hours approached, she would start to feel anxious about the day ahead, or she would think back to embarrassing moments in her life, and the dread would grow within her. As a child and a teenager, she had never had any problems with sleeping. In fact, she probably slept too much. She loved to laze around in bed reading or scrolling through her phone. It was when she got to her mid-20s that things began to change. No longer could she have as many lazy days as possible in bed. She had to get up and work and be a responsible adult. Lucia loved living with her friends, but their constant partying played havoc with her sleeping pattern. She loved to go out and socialize. She often went out 3 or 4 times a week and then had to work 8 hours in the office the next day. A few years later, she decided to retrain to work as a nurse, which meant she had to cover day and night shifts. This was when the problems really started to emerge. Due to the nature of her working patterns, she struggled to find a rhythm and often felt completely exhausted. She tried everything the magazines and influencers told her to try. She joined yoga classes, listened to meditation tapes, tried not to drink caffeine after lunch, didn't use her phone after 8 p.m., sprayed lavender scents on her pillow, and all of it was to no avail. She still struggled to fall asleep. After feeling completely and utterly exhausted, she decided to see a doctor. They advised all the things she had already tried. They said she could try medication, but it was something she wanted to avoid. If she could do it naturally, she would try that first. Lucia realized she needed to give herself more of a routine. She started to plan her weeks and attempted to fit in a brisk walk or a run or some sort of exercise every day. After Lucia had found a good routine, her life ticked along just fine. That was until recently, when her old sleeping habits had begun to creep back in. She found that her problem had morphed. She no longer had a problem with falling asleep. The problem was with staying asleep. She found this even more frustrating. At the end of a long day, Lucia would fall into bed to a night of dreamless sleep with relative ease. Then, hours later, she would be wide awake, tossing and turning and feeling more frustrated than ever. She couldn't understand why she kept waking up. She didn't suffer from nightmares or sleep paralysis. She tried all sorts to fix the problem and went back to her old tricks of no phone before bed, no coffee or tea in the afternoon, no alcohol, meditating regularly, and again it was all to no avail. She considered going to see her doctor as she thought she might have a breathing problem, which was why she kept waking up. But she knew, deep down, that wasn't the case. Lucia told her friends about her problem with sleeping, and they immediately knew what the issue was. "We've been worried about you for a while, Lucia," they told her. "You've been really agitated and on edge. You need a holiday. We know you're doing overtime so you can save some money, but it's driving you into the ground. You aren't acting like yourself anymore, and it's obviously affecting your sleep too." Lucia was shocked but pleased that her friends were so straightforward and honest with her. If it's one thing she could count on with her friends, it was their honesty. Lucia decided to take a step back and look at her calendar. Her friends were right. Perhaps she was doing too much. She had a well-organized routine, but she never had a minute to herself. Even relaxing time was planned into her bursting diary. Aside from working regular overtime shifts, she managed to fit yoga, Pilates, meditation, walks, work, seeing friends, food shopping, batch cooking, and more into just 1 week. She thought this was the way forward in helping her sleep worries, but the reality was that attempting to keep up with such a busy routine might have been causing her unknown anxieties. Lucia looked at her diary for the forthcoming months. She had volunteered to do an extra shift every week. As a nurse, she normally worked 3 or 4 days a week. Her shifts were 12 hours long. Lucia wanted to save up to buy a new kitchen and put some extra money into her savings account, so she was taking on extra shifts. She was saving quickly and was proud of herself, but it seemed she might have been putting herself under a lot of subconscious pressure. Lucia didn't want to let the team down. She would work all of the shifts she had committed to, but she would need to make other changes. She had budgeted for those extra shifts and would be able to save a substantial amount of money. She looked through her jam-packed diary and realized she could make some amendments. Her only concern was her sleeping and what she could do to get rid of those annoying sleepless nights. Of course, everyone experiences sleepless nights from time to time, but it happened to Lucia every evening. It was now a normal occurrence in her life, and it was having a substantial impact on her. She constantly felt dazed and couldn't concentrate properly. She needed to be on top form when working as a nurse. She decided to take out her shopping trips and replace them with home deliveries. That way, not only would it take the stress from her life, but it could help her budget, as she wouldn't be tempted to throw extra items into her trolley when she was browsing the aisles. That would save her a few hours and quite a bit of petrol every week. Then she decided to limit the number of exercise classes she was going to. She had found some great YouTubers, so if she felt the need to stretch after a long shift, she could find a free class and do it in the comfort of her home, rather than driving an extra 20 minutes to get to the yoga studio. Lucia scrutinized her diary even further. She loved to read and was putting herself under pressure to read a certain amount of books per month. The joy had been sapped out of her once favorite hobby. She decided to change the goal she had originally set, and suddenly she felt like a load had been lifted. She then looked at the trips and visits she had lined up. She had planned a spa weekend with friends, a market town visit, ceramics class, sewing workshops, and self-defense classes. She realized, now she was looking with clear eyes, that she was doing far too much. She couldn't find a day in the next 6 weeks when she could just stay at home and relax. She decided to call her friends and rearrange some of the classes for the following month. She would spread out her commitments to allow herself some free time. Lucia had become so accustomed to being constantly busy that having a slightly clearer diary made her feel a tad anxious. Over the next week or so, her sleeping continued to be interrupted. She tossed and turned and felt irritated at her body for doing this to her. But as the weeks went on and her diary became more manageable, she found she could sleep longer. And when she did wake up, she fell asleep much quicker. Slowly, over the course of 3 months, Lucia started to feel more like a human. She was no longer a walking zombie trying to fit anything and everything into her life, as well as attempting to be a mindfulness extraordinaire. Lucia knew she had to keep her timetable in check and take care of herself to enable her to have a restful night's sleep. She hoped her sleepless nights would now firmly remain a thing of the past.